Let me ask you about your book. You're profiling some of the most famous leaders in history, some good, some bad. You're looking at the definition of leadership, comparing styles of different famous figures. You were in a great position of leadership during your service. How has your definition of leadership changed after writing this book and your own experiences?
Well, it's funny, you and I have talked before about this. I went through a career trying to learn leadership, and then I got to a point in life where I realized I didn't understand the basic concept of it. So I went back with two co-authors and studied Plutarch, and we looked at leadership as it has been portrayed in biographies, and we realized it's been portrayed too simplistically. The leader on a pedestal, the leader responsible, the leader having a series of behaviors or traits, the leader being the person to deliver us to the promised land. And that's not right. It's really an interaction between followers and leaders. It's this complex relationship. You take Robespierre in the French Revolution. We think of him as leading the violence. In reality, he wrote a bunch of speeches. He was an introvert in a room, and he whipped up people just through the written word.
Right.
Abu Musab al-Zarqawi went out and cut heads off himself. And what he did was he inflamed people. And so it's the basic relationship between followers and the leaders that we have to study and understand, and realize that followers have agency. We have responsibility, much more than we've ever thought before. If we stand and wait for a great woman or man to come and lead us, we're going to be sadly mistaken, and we have much greater responsibility for the direction we go and the things we do or we fail to do.
Really, really important point that you make. Let me take you back to the news of the day in terms of leadership with this caravan. What do you want to see done to stop these people from thinking they can just jump the line and get in front of those people who've been waiting and going through the regular legal structure of getting into America?
Well, I'm a great believer we need to start with immigration reform, because we're having a lot of arguments on the fringes now. But to the caravan itself, I think we need to send a firm message that clearly it's not fair to do that. On the other hand, we've got to understand that many of them are fleeing something that you or I would flee with our families in a similar situation. We can criticize, but if our children were hungry, we would steal bread. If we were in a situation, we might well get into the caravan. And I think the United States has got, as it has always been, has got to represent a nation with compassion, a nation with a big heart. But at the same time, as you say, that's balanced with a big heart in an equitable way.
Right, in an equitable way where we can't necessarily afford thousands of people coming here regularly who will ultimately need jobs, health care, and other resources that are given to American citizens, where those people who are not coming in a legal manner will take away from current citizens.
That's very true, but you and I are Americans by accident of birth. We didn't do a thing to earn it. We just got it, and hopefully we've earned it later. And the reality is we need to understand that many of the people in the United States were immigrants or are children of immigrants, and so we need to keep an open mind about that. We need to not say just because we're here and we got ours that we deserve it. We have to earn it every day.
That's absolutely right. And one of the most interesting comparisons you make in this book, leaders of two very different industries, Walt Disney and Coco Chanel. Interesting comparison. Tell me about it.
Yeah, can you imagine? I wrote about Coco Chanel. I didn't know she existed before we wrote this book. But what they were both founders. Coco Chanel was an orphan, and she was opportunistic, but she was bright, she was energetic, and she worked really hard. She was a tough boss, tough to work for. People would stand for hours like human mannequins while she chain smoked and designed clothes on their bodies. But at the same time, she revolutionized women's clothing at that critical inflection point around the First World War. Walt Disney changed entertainment because he created the first really advanced animated shorts, and then he creates Snow White, the first full-length movie. But even he has a tough time when he gets to it becomes the big enterprise that Disney Studios became. So what we have to learn is those leaders become symbols. They are important. They do move us forward. They do inspire us. But Disney wasn't he wasn't the whole Disney organization any more than Coco Chanel, in fact, was the Chanel brand and the Chanel empire. We follow leaders because they fill some part of us that we need. Part of it's inspiration, part of it's emotional, and they become symbols for us. And then they motivate us into doing things we might not otherwise do.
Interesting to see this other comparison. Former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, regarded as one of the great leaders of the 20th century, someone like Boss Tweed, who to this day remains the face of political corruption. Why these two as in terms of a comparison?
Well, we call them the power brokers, not politicians, because they operated within systems to use power. Boss Tweed grew up in New York City in the Tammany organization, and he leveraged the Tammany organization to put himself and a few colleagues in a position to take just unprecedented amounts of wealth corruptly out of the government. Margaret Thatcher, the grocer's daughter, she rises in British politics in times when a British woman, that's a tough row to hoe. And so she does that by being a woman of conviction. She's not flexible politically. She's got strong beliefs that echo back to the ideas of Winston Churchill, the idea that Britain can be great. And just in the late 60s and 70s, when Britain is going through economic malaise and a loss of confidence, she says no.
Yeah.
Kind of like Ronald Reagan did for the United States. She says we can and must be better than this.
Fascinating. General, it's great to get your insights. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Maria.
General Stanley McChrystal joining us there. The book is Leaders.